This is Get Real with Bob and Stacy, the show that helps you learn about the mortgage and real estate markets. Get the inside scoop from their expert list of guests and have some fun along the way. Now, here's Bob Gallagher and Stacy Alcorn.
Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment, and our first guest today is Doug Box, certified family business advisor as well as a published author. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.
So I want to give some background on Doug. He is a family business advisor, author, and public speaker. He's entertained audiences around the country at family business forums and as a guest lecturer at top universities. Through his thoughtful presentations, he tells his own family's incredible story, Texas Patriarch, the rise and fall of a family business, disclosing his unique insight on family business growth, success, and failures. He has published 2 books, Cutter Frisco, Growing Up on the Original South Fork Ranch in 2014, and his newest book, which he published this year, Texas Patriarch, A Legacy Lost. Doug has been featured in a number of newspaper and magazine articles, and he's made appearances on network TV and radio. So first, Doug, tell us about your books.
Well, first of all, Stacy, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be with you and Bob. Well, Texas Patriarch, A Legacy Lost is a memoir, a true life story of my growing up, in the lap of Texas luxury. Mm-hmm. My father was one of these larger-than-life figures who could seemingly do no wrong. He rose up out of poverty. He played professional football for the Detroit Lions. Wow. He joined the Marines, fought in World War II and the Korean War, and scaled the American dream. Mm-hmm. And then toward the end of his life, a couple of missteps put the enterprise in great jeopardy, and then we didn't have a lot of good forward planning in place. And when he unexpectedly died of a heart attack at the age of 70, all heck broke loose.
Wow.
And my 3 older brothers and I ended up suing each other in court.
Wow.
So I wrote this book as a cautionary tale to help families be smarter and work harder about preserving their family wealth enterprise.
So what kind of business was it that your father built?
We were in oil and gas,
okay.
Offshore Louisiana in the Gulf of Mexico, and we also had a cement business, a very profitable cement plant mm-hmm. south of Dallas. Mm-hmm. And so those 2 businesses were the core of our family's business, and they were good complements to each other because it was like when one of them was down, the other one seemed to be doing better. So
right.
It was a good mix.
And were you and your brothers working in the business prior to your father's passing?
Yes, and that was one of the problems. Dad was one of those strong, controlling figures who, wanted all of his sons. He had 4 sons. I was the youngest of the 4. He wanted all 4 of us to work for him in the business, mm-hmm. which, looking back, I'm not sure that was very well conceived. But that's kind of how men of that generation were. Mm-hmm. They believed in, controlling everything, and it was that sort of that Marine Corps command and control thing. And so I never wanted to work in the business. I never wanted to work for my dad. Not that I had anything against him. I had other interests, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And so, all 4 of us worked in the business, and that became a huge problem later on because we didn't really have any way of understanding how difficult it was going to be to work together, especially after our father passed away.
Right.
As long as he was around, everything was cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was the judge, jury, and executioner. But when he suddenly departed from his sudden death, mm-hmm. Caught everybody by surprise, and we were like, caught flat-footed, and we're
right.
like trying to deal with each other. And now instead of my dad signing my payroll check, one of my brothers is signing my payroll
wow.
check. Well, that gets pretty ticklish.
Right. Wow. You were sharing a statistic earlier that you said family-owned companies, 60 to 70% will fail from generation 1 to 2. Generation 2 to 3 will see a 90% fail rate. Like, that's incredible. Why does that happen?
You know, Stacy, you're so right on. Those statistics they've done a lot of studies on this. These are well-born numbers, and the reason is, well, there's all kinds of reasons, but just in general, the reason is a lack of planning. Most family-owned companies, well, for that matter, most non-family-owned companies or businesses have little formal succession plans written down. They are not worried about that because they're worried about making money. And the people that are in power, actually running these organizations, they're not worried about it because, you know, that's the last thing anybody wants to do right now is think about their own exit, you know. And so it's a very difficult conversation. This is a perfect place for an outside advisor to come in and work with a family to help them realize the importance of, look, you got to have a plan for this stuff. You know, your patriarch or your matriarch or your leader, he's not going to live forever, and we've got to have a contingency plan. We call that a succession plan. Most firms won't have one. Like 90% of them don't have them.
It's so interesting because even with Bob owns a big mortgage company, and that was a family business and got passed down basically to one child out of several. So what was the thought process when your dad did that?
Well, we started together, so I already owned half.
So you guys originally started it.
Yeah, and then I was the only one that had the resources to buy him out. So, interestingly enough, though, other siblings do work in the business, but it's never been a problem for us. Luckily.
Wow. It's so interesting.
Well, you raise a good point because so 2 out of 3 of family-owned firms don't make it, which means that 1/3 of them do. And a lot of the times, what we find through the research is that what accounts for the 1/3 that do make it through, sometimes it's just luck. You know, and it sounds like there was an element of that. And I'm not saying that you guys didn't do a lot of good stuff, but it sounds like things just had a way of sort of working out serendipitously for you guys, Bob. I don't know.
Wow, that's so interesting. So can you share with us like a success story of a business that you've helped, a family business that you've assisted?
Yeah, there's a great, several instances. There's a great little family business here in Dallas that I don't think they'd mind me saying their name because it'd be good PR for them. JPS Graphics Corporation here in Dallas, Johnson Printing Services. And they're a third-generation family-owned business, and they brought me in about 2 years ago just to interview everybody. They were fortunate because they had what we call a leader among equals. So there were 5 children in the second generation, but the oldest son was the most gifted, if you will. And the key to that is that the others recognized that. They recognized that he was the first among the group. And I think it helped that he was the oldest, and he was just one of these guys with a lot of emotional, social intelligence. He was a good boss. He was good to his siblings who deferred to him. And, you have this sort of, I don't want to call it purely luck, but it was just something that, had he not been, had Bob Johnson Jr. not been the guy that he was, I don't think this thing would have worked out nearly as well. If he had been, arrogant or what it really comes down to is leadership. And he was a very good leader, and he brought me in, and he said, you know what, I just want to know what everybody wants to do. I want you to interview them, Doug, so that I know they'll tell you things, they may not want to tell me. And so I came in and did all the work and, just really applaud what the Johnson family did here in Dallas because they were able to, engage outside advice to help them, prepare for the next generation's succession. And so that's a really great. The business is growing. They're doing well. People are making money, and they're happy. That's what it's all about.
That's awesome. Have either of you seen the television show Bloodlines?
No, I haven't. I haven't even heard of it.
Have you seen it, Doug?
I've seen previews for it, yes.
Oh, because Bloodlines is about a family business, but it's just interesting. It's like it's got all kinds of stuff involved, but it's a family business, and the patriarch of the family unexpectedly passes away. But you really get to see how, and I think it's true in every business, that even the siblings that are not involved in the business, they end up getting involved because it's part of the family dynamic, whether or not you're involved in the actual business.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, when you go into a family business, and let's just say that there are 4 or 5 siblings that all want to be involved in this family business, like what are the first steps you take to figure out who is involved in what aspects of the business?
Well, the first thing I would look at in a situation like that is you have to understand everything. Before you can come in and begin advising a family, you really have to. There's a learning curve that you really have to go through. One of the key things is, as an advisor, we all struggle with this. You don't give advice too soon, because you've got to have a depth of understanding about their family and about their business before you can do anything. Sometimes the surface, issue is not the real issue. So this is a little bit like psychology. I think of myself as a shrink for the family business, and you've got to have the luxury of time to go in there,
right,
get to know people, and understand the business and the family dynamics. Of course, the first thing I would do, to be a little more specific, is I would try to figure out, is there a viable role for every family member? Does everybody actually have a real job, or is this some sort of corporate welfare job? Because if it is, that can sometimes lead to friction. If sibling A is the heavy and doing a lot of the hard lifting, and the others are sort of slackers, over time that's going to wear away at their relationship. So the first thing I would try to do is figure out how real are the roles and jobs that everybody is going to play in this business. What role is everybody going to play, and how is that all going to fit together, and how well does it fit together?
Right. I'm curious with your personal story and what you went through. Do you still speak to any of your brothers?
Yes, I do, and fortunately, I get along very well. I had 3 brothers. One of them has unfortunately passed away, and the other 2 that are left, we're very cordial, but we do not talk about this story because it did not end well,
right?
And so we're able to talk about other pleasantries,
right,
in a very good way. We can
That's
talk
great.
about the Cowboys.
Yes.
And we can talk about the weather and whatever, but we don't go to this story because it's just something that, as I said, it was very much a story of loss. Our family lost a lot, and so we just don't go there.
So in our market, the Massachusetts market, one fairly recent and very famous story, very similar to this, where a family became divided, which divided a massive company, is Market Basket and the Demoulas family. Are you familiar with it at all?
No, I'm not, but I bet my partners up there in Boston are.
Oh, it was massive. So Market Basket is like the biggest grocery store chain throughout New England. Massive. And it was, were they an uncle and a nephew?
Well, it was the grandfather started it, then the brothers inherited it when the grandfather passed away, his 2 sons. But one son died very early on before it started expanding, so it was basically one brother who expanded it. Well, the kids of the 2 original sons are the ones that just went into an all-out war.
Oh, it was so public.
Yeah.
Like, basically, the entire Market Basket organization went on strike for several months. It was crazy.
Because one cousin fired the CEO that was running it.
Oh, my God.
When he took over the board. It was ugly, and it was on TV, the
constant.
newspapers. Yeah, it was around the clock.
And like nobody could food shop. Like you'd
Yeah,
go
I
in
know.
and the places were bare, and it was like you were a trader. If you went into one
Yeah.
of the Market
Oh, no.
Basket grocery stores, it was massive. But basically, it created a forced buyout by one of the
Right.
siblings. Basically,
Well, yeah, the other
Yeah.
cousin got it back. But the interesting thing is, a lot of people thought that the store would be ruined, and in the end, it wasn't. They actually, the day it was the buyout happened,
right.
everybody started going back again. It
Yes.
was crazy.
So it's interesting. There's a book on it. I have not read the book yet, but
That sounds like a great read.
yeah, it really makes you realize, and I think it even gets further complicated. Like I look in my own business, I have 23 real estate offices, so it's kind of a family business, but I do have a business partner. So it's kind of similar. Like we both have families that are involved in the business, so it complicates things even more.
Yeah, and we've
Yeah,
all
I'll ask my partners in Boston. I've got a partnership, believe it or not, with a firm in Boston, Continuity Family Business Consulting,
Yep.
and I'll ask them about that. They should have hired Doug Baumel and Blair
Yes.
Tripp for the job because they're right there local. I'm sure they know the story.
Yes.
yeah. I think the
very
governor
well.
actually had to get involved
He
in it.
did.
Believe it or not.
It was really nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting
Yeah.
story.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, no, that would be a great read.
So
Market Basket.
Yes, Market Basket and the DeMoulis family. Crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's the prime example that everyone's, if you want to, you have a better example than I do of how this thing can, the wheels can come off these things and
Yes.
become very dysfunctional,
Yep.
and not just do damage to the business, which is bad enough, but strain family relationships,
Exactly.
which is the worst thing in the world that you can do is mess up your family. Here we are on December 23rd, and it's Christmas time and stuff, and like this is always the time of year where family relationships are really put to the test.
Yeah.
And if you've we all know families that are estranged or cut off in some way, and it's always about money. It's always
Right.
about business, or an estate. Somebody died, and the executor didn't handle the antique lamp
Right.
properly. It's just sometimes it's the little things, and it's just wrong. I think it's terrible when these things happen. I've been through it, and that's why I dedicated the rest of my career to trying to prevent families from falling apart over this stuff. And it's all about planning. And the other thing that we haven't talked about is governance, and that's a big deal in our world, and that my partners in Boston are experts on, is this idea of family business governance. And the idea is pretty simple: that once the founder goes away, you got to replace him with some sort of internal governmental structure. Typically, that's a board. That's either an advisory board or a family council. You have to try and do something to replace that leader, founder, patriarch with something that is probably not going to be as good as the real thing. But what most families do is nothing
Right.
because they don't know what to do.
Right.
And I would assume that the Market Basket family, I can't say their name. What was their name
the
again?
DeMoulis family. Yep.
Mullet's family probably didn't do much until this stuff hit the fan, and then they're
Right.
like, okay, now what do we do?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, our time is about up. Where can people find your books? Again, Doug's books. His most recent one is Texas Patriarch: A Legacy Lost, as well as his earlier book, Cutter Frisco: Growing Up on the Original South Fork Ranch. Where can people find out more about your books and about you?
Both books are on Amazon.com
Yep.
as well as BarnesandNoble.com.
Okay.
And if you're listening to this in the South, most Barnes and Noble's brick and mortar stores are carrying Texas Patriarch now because
Great.
it's published work. But they're both on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thanks for being on the show with us, Doug.
Bob, Stacy, great to be on the show. Merry Christmas, and hope you guys have a wonderful New Year.
Same to you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Get Real after this.